Well, energy and sustainability development is going to be a challenge for the Caribbean region, especially for the smaller states. For the smaller states, they have limited natural resources, unlike Trinidad and Tobago and perhaps Guyana and Jamaica, where there's natural minerals. In the smaller Caribbean islands, our natural environment is the sun, the sea, and the sand. So that the energy that we utilize is basically imported energy. We all rely on fossil fuels to power up our power plants and our generating stations. And so this phenomenon that over 1.3 billion persons around the world don't have access to energy and affordable energy is perhaps nothing that surprises me, because I believe that we all have the same sort of constraints or restrictions where we don't have access to natural resources, natural gas, coal, that will be able to power up power plants and generating stations. So the challenge that we have in small developing Caribbean states is what would be the best source of energy other than fossil fuels that would allow us to have access to energy so that everyone can benefit from the use of energy. The major challenge that we have in the smaller islands is the cost. The cost of importing fossil fuels is very expensive. And so in many states, because the government owns the generating stations or the power plants, they have to import the fuel, and then that is charged to the customer in the form of the electrical bills every month. The challenge that we have, obviously, is what can we utilize that will be cheaper than fossil fuels? Is it the sun? Is it the wind? Is it the ocean? Is it volcanic? And so you will find that in some of our islands, although we are very small, some of us may have more opportunities. In the BVI, in the Virgin Islands where I'm from, we have an abundance of sunlight. We have an abundance of wind. And so those are two components or two sources that we are currently looking at as an option to transfer in or transition in from fossil fuels to other sources of energy. We also have the waste to energy concept. We basically dispose of our garbage through an incinerator, and that energy can be used to power our generating stations. Fortunately for us, the incinerator is located adjacent to the power plant. So perhaps the infrastructure that will be required to connect the two facilities will not be cost prohibitive. But certainly in places like Montserrat, where they have an active volcano, they are looking seriously at geothermal energy. And in other Caribbean islands like Grenada, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and so on, they are also looking at those options. So that at the end of the day, the challenges that we face in the Caribbean islands are not extreme to other parts of the world where persons don't have access to affordable electricity. We just want to be able to find a way to ensure that we have a product that is affordable to all of the residents in our country. The experience today for me in the mock assembly is not new. The only difference I would say today is that the only time that we really engage stakeholders or professionals in various fields as it relates to government trying to implement policies or legislation to obviously ensure that best practices are adhered to in our country, is that we don't actually examine professional persons or experts at our committee meetings. We basically speak to our permanent secretaries who are quote unquote the technocrats that will be able to disseminate the information to us as parliamentarians for us to be able to make those decisions as to which way we move, what pieces of legislation we need to write in order to implement best practices. So the experience today was a very good one, but the process is exactly the same that we have back home. We have a process called Standing Finance, which takes place every year during the budget cycle. And that would allow us an opportunity to question the permanent secretaries or the senior officers as to what they're doing and what needs to be done to ensure that best practices are adopted in our country. I thought that the session today was a very good one because we have had an opportunity to speak to two individuals that are professionals in their own field as it relates to the Savannah East project. And certainly we were able to get first-hand knowledge from them as to what was involved in the project, the cost of the project, the hurdles that they overcame in the project, and what the ultimate end result is going to be. We, as a body, we were able to field a number of questions from the concept of the project to the financing to the end result as to who the users would be and what the users, i.e. the tenants, would be expecting to get from that building on completion. So I thought that the exercise this morning was a very interesting one. I would say that for the 4 days that we were here, today in that session to me capped off all that we were trying to achieve over the last 4 days. Well, the role of parliamentarians is not an easy one. Because I think I would be the first to say we are not the experts, but we are the persons that are responsible for ensuring that the experts provide us with the best means possible or the best practices for us to be able to pass laws, implement policies to ensure that energy and sustainability is available to the masses of the population, if not all of the members of the population. For that to happen, we obviously always have to be exposed to consultants, to experts. We have to have proposals presented to us, presentations made to us, and it will involve, obviously, to some extent, some travels overseas for us to be able to see what is taking place in other countries where sustainable development and energy efficiency has been already implemented. This trip from the 6th to the 11th is an example. If I were not exposed to this trip, I would not have been in a position to go back to my colleagues and certainly to my constituents and say there are best practices available for energy development and sustainability. They exist in Trinidad, they exist in the Cayman Islands, they exist in Europe, they exist in the United States, wherever. And so we are in a unique position where, as parliamentarians, we get first-hand information as to what we need to do to pass laws and implement policies to ensure that energy efficiency is something that the masses would have the benefit of getting at an affordable price. Because at the end of the day, the constituents are always saying it's too expensive. You're not doing enough to make sure that you bring the prices down. Do we continue to have dialogue with the exporters and the importers as to how we can get the prices down? So we have a very important role to play, and it just doesn't rest at being in your country sitting behind a desk. It will involve meetings with heads of corporations, with experts in the field of energy and energy development, with experts in the field of sustainable development. And so that at the end of the day, it sometimes may take several years for things to be implemented, but the process of ensuring that your constituents at the end of the day get the best value for money is based on the fact that we as parliamentarians would have been exposed to the best practices and the best sources of information that are available outside. In most of the smaller Caribbean islands like the BVI and the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos and so on, we have to rely on expertise from overseas most of the times for these types of discussions to take place. Once we are satisfied that we have received the best information, then obviously legislation is drafted. We have a debate in the House or in Parliament so the public can understand exactly what it is we are trying to do. In some instances, we may have to have a wider public consultation so that they will understand what shift we are trying to make, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that will be paying the bill.